The world breaks everyone, and afterward many are strong at the broken places. But those that will not break it, kills. Ernest Hemingway wrote those words, but they could have been carved into the soul of Holden Caulfield. In the cramped quarters of a prep school dormitory, a voice emerges from the darkness of post-war America, speaking truths that parents don't want to hear and teenagers recognize as their own. The year is 1951. America wears the mask of prosperity, but beneath the gleaming surface, something restless stirs. J.D. Salinger, a war veteran carrying his own invisible wounds, sits at his typewriter in rural New Hampshire, channeling the voice of a boy who sees through the veneer. Holden Caulfield becomes the mirror America didn't know it needed. Language becomes rebellion. Every goddamn and phony that falls from Holden's lips strikes like a small revolution against the sanitized speech of the era. Salinger crafts a voice so authentic it bleeds through the page, raw and unfiltered. The boy speaks like teenagers actually speak, not how adults think they should speak. The red hunting hat sits askew on Holden's head, a crown of nonconformity in a world demanding uniformity. It's too big, too bright, too different. Like its wearer, it refuses to blend into the beige backdrop of 1950s respectability. The hat becomes armour against a world that wounds by its very existence. Pensy Prep stands as a cathedral of phoniness, its Gothic towers casting shadows over boys being moulded into acceptable men. The institution promises to shape character, but Holden sees only the machinery of conformity grinding souls into socially acceptable dust. Education becomes indoctrination, and learning becomes forgetting how to feel. Salinger knows this world intimately. Valley Forge Military Academy, McBurney School, Ursinus College, each institution left its mark on him, each expulsion a step toward understanding the distance between what schools promise and what they deliver. The author's biography becomes his protagonist's rebellion. The ducks in Central Park's lagoon vanish each winter, leaving behind only questions and ice. Holden fixates on their mysterious disappearance, needing to know where they go, how they survive, if they return. In their absence, he sees his own uncertain future reflected in still water. Phoebe's innocence shines like a lighthouse in Holden's fog of disillusionment. She represents everything pure that the world hasn't yet corrupted, everything he desperately wants to protect. Her laughter becomes the sound of what he's fighting to preserve. The Museum of Natural History holds time in amber, its exhibits forever frozen in perfect, unchanging moments. Holden loves its constancy. The Eskimo will always be fishing. The glass cases will always protect their treasures from the chaos outside. But people change, and change terrifies him more than death. DB sells his stories to Hollywood, trading art for money, integrity for success. In his older brother's compromise, Holden sees the future that awaits every creative soul, the slow prostitution of talent to the machinery of commerce. Dreams become commodities, and artists become whores. The war has ended, but its ghosts haunt the pages. Salinger landed on D-Day, witnessed the liberation of concentration camps, carried home trauma that seeps into every line of his novel. Holden's alienation echoes the shell shock of a generation returning to a world that no longer makes sense. Jane Gallagher exists in memory's amber, forever young, forever mysterious. She keeps her kings in the back row during checkers, and in that small rebellion against the rules, Holden sees a kindred spirit. Love becomes the memory of innocence, untouched by time's corrupting hand. The falling snow transforms New York into a different city, softening its harsh edges, muffling its aggressive sounds. As Holden wanders through the transformed landscape, the snow becomes a metaphor for the gentle covering he wishes could protect all wounded souls. Winter makes the city beautiful and terrible at once. Antolini's apartment offers sanctuary, but even safe harbours prove treacherous. The teacher's late-night touch shatters another refuge, leaving Holden to question whether anywhere truly offers protection from the world's predatory nature. trust becomes another casualty of experience. The carousel music plays its eternal song, and Phoebe reaches for the brass ring with determined innocence. Holden wants to protect her from falling, but in that moment of recognition, he understands that he must let her reach. Growing up requires the risk of falling. Salinger's reclusiveness begins here, in the success that threatens to turn him into what he despises. The more famous he becomes, the more he retreats, understanding that celebrity is just another form of phoniness. The author becomes his own character, fleeing the world's corrupting embrace. The Grand Central Station bathroom becomes a temple of breakdown, where Holden's facade finally crumbles. In that tiled sanctuary, surrounded by the echoes of rushing commuters, he confronts the weight of his isolation. Even public spaces can't contain private anguish. Ali's baseball mitt carries poems written in green ink, transforming sports equipment into literature. The dead boy's presence haunts every page, a reminder of innocence lost not to corruption but to leukemia's cruel mathematics. Death becomes the ultimate thief of purity. The nuns at Grand Central represent goodness without pretense, charity without agenda. Their simple presence in the station becomes a brief oasis of authentic human connection in Holden's desert of phoniness. Holden finds grace in unexpected places. The record, Little Shirley Beans, lies shattered on the sidewalk, its pieces glittering like broken dreams. Holden had bought it for Phoebe, but now it joins the casualties of his wandering, another gift the world has destroyed. Even acts of love become fragments. Spencer's old age frightens Holden more than death itself. The history teacher's yellowing teeth and native blanket represent the slow decay that awaits everyone, the gradual loss of dignity that time inflicts on all flesh. Aging becomes a horror more terrible than dying young. The Edmont Hotel throbs with adult corruption, its windows revealing scenes of perversion and loneliness. From his room, Holden watches the secret lives of strangers, seeing in their desperate acts the future that awaits all innocence. The hotel becomes a museum of human compromise. The 1950s demand conformity, but Holden's voice cracks that demand like ice in spring. His refusal to fit the mold speaks to every teenager who has ever felt like an alien in their own life. Rebellion becomes a form of prayer. The book scandalizes America, banned from schools and libraries, proof that Salinger has struck a nerve. Adults recognize the danger of Holden's honesty, the way it exposes the hypocrisies they've built their lives upon. Truth becomes contraband. The snow globe in Holden's memory contains a perfect world, sealed and protected from change. Like the museum exhibits, it represents his longing for permanence in a world of constant, painful transformation. Beauty exists only in isolation. Holden's breakdown becomes America's awakening. His mental collapse mirrors the nation's growing awareness of its own contradictions, the gap between its promises and its realities. Individual crisis becomes collective revelation. The ducks return each spring, but Holden never sees them. His question remains unanswered, like so many of the mysteries that torment him. Sometimes the unknowing is the point, the question more important than the answer. Wonder survives only in uncertainty. Salinger's war service in the Counterintelligence Corps taught him to see through deception, to recognize the gap between official truth and reality. These skills serve him well in creating a character who sees through everyone's lies. The spy becomes the novelist, observation becomes art. The Catcher in the Rye exists only in Holden's misheard lyrics, a fantasy job protecting children from falling off cliffs. But the real poem is about lovers meeting secretly, about adult desire, about everything Holden fears. Misunderstanding becomes the source of meaning. The book's first-person narration traps readers inside Holden's consciousness, making them complicit in his observations. We cannot escape his voice, cannot maintain distance from his pain. The reader becomes the patient. The book becomes therapy. Pensie's motto promises to make boys into splendid, clear-thinking young men, but Holden sees only the manufacturing of acceptable hypocrites. The school's promises ring hollow against the reality of its graduates. Education becomes a broken promise. The Central Park lagoon freezes solid, its ducks vanished, its surface reflecting only sky. Holden stares into this mirror of absence, seeing his own disappeared childhood, his own uncertain future. Ice becomes a metaphor for paralysis. Phoebe's school smells of floor wax and childhood, but even there, obscenity scrawled on walls threatens innocence. Holden tries to erase the words, but they multiply faster than he can clean them. Corruption spreads like a virus. The book endures because every generation recognizes Holden's voice, finds in his alienation an echo of their own displacement. His search for authenticity in a phony world remains eternally relevant. Literature becomes a time machine, carrying pain across decades. Salinger's retreat to Cornish, New Hampshire mirrors his character's search for refuge. The author builds walls around his privacy, protecting his authenticity from the world's corrupting attention. The recluse becomes the ultimate catcher in the rye. The carousel turns in its eternal circle, carrying children up and down but never forward. In its repetitive motion, Holden finds a strange peace, an acceptance of life's circular nature. Motion becomes stillness, change becomes constancy. The book's banning makes it more powerful, not less. Each attempt to silence Holden's voice only amplifies it, proves the continued relevance of his critique of adult hypocrisy. Censorship becomes advertisement for truth. The brass ring gleams just out of reach, requiring courage to grasp. Phoebe stretches for it despite the danger, embodying the risk that growth requires, the falling that learning demands. Reaching becomes its own reward. Holden's story ends where it began, in an institution where adults try to fix what they've broken in him. But his voice carries beyond these walls, speaking to every soul who has ever felt displaced by the world's demands. The patient becomes the prophet. The snow continues to fall on New York, covering the city's wounds with temporary beauty. Somewhere in that transformed landscape, Holden's voice still echoes, still calls to those who refuse to accept the world's phoniness as inevitable. In the end, the catcher catches us all.